Hello and welcome to Riverland Women, the podcast that celebrates the remarkable achievements and inspiring stories of women across South Australia's Riverland. I'm Kerrie Lush from the podcast station. I'm a journalist, a podcast host and coach, and former ABC radio broadcaster. Each episode, we meet extraordinary women who call this region home. And today's guest is no exception. Suzi Evans is passionate about helping people strengthen their mental fitness. She actually says she's obsessed, and she finds it helps her too. Originally from Adelaide, Suzi moved to the Riverland and Mallee almost 2 decades ago. It was after a visit to celebrate her grandmother's 90th birthday that brought her back to the region, and it reconnected her with her childhood crush, her now husband Mick, who is a Mallee farmer at Mantung. Life on the farm was a major shift, but a happy one. That was until 2 devastating events changed everything.
In January 2018, sadly, I lost my son, my only child, to suicide. So obviously my world was just shattered and my life completely turned upside down. The absolute understatement. And a dear friend of mine that I went to primary school with had suggested that I do my diploma in positive psychology and wellbeing as a form of understanding my grief and what was happening. And I sort of applied for it, but it was a full week in Adelaide and I cancelled last minute. I just wasn't ready. It was all still very too raw for me. Anyway, then the following year, so I suppose it was 18 months later, my husband Mick got hospitalised with Guillain-Barré syndrome for 6 months. So for those that don't know what Guillain-Barré is, it's when your immune system attacks your peripheral nerves. So we were shearing on the Friday and he was rolling out bales of wool. And then on the Monday, we actually went to hospital Sunday, but basically Monday afternoon, he was waiting to be airlifted to Adelaide. He was paralysed from the neck down. So another absolute stressful trauma for both of us. He had to learn to walk again. So he was in hospital for 6 months, 3 months in Modbury, and then 3 months he got transferred to the Berry Regional Riverland Hospital, and then came home just before COVID hit. Well, it was just starting to raise itself there. And so when he came home, so his diagnosis was that he would either be in a wheelchair for life or a home. And he came home in a wheelchair and he's done an amazing job, very strong man emotionally and physically. And he's not in a wheelchair and he's not in a home, he's in our home. So that's really lovely.
When you lost your son and then you had Mick's illness, was that something that just kept you going at that time? And perhaps, did you deal with things at the time, the grief, or was it just pushed to the side a bit because you just had to keep going for Mick as well?
I think for me, I don't believe you actually get through grief. I think it's something that you learn to function alongside of. I truly believe you don't get through it. And for Mick, it was another form of grief for me because I was so scared I was going to lose him. He nearly died in that first 48 hours. And I was only just starting to get on my own feet a little bit. Mick is my rock, incredibly my rock. And I was incredibly selfish at that time because I thought, I need you. You can't do this. But we also Yeah, I mean, I had to push mine aside. I had to be there for Mick. I mean, he was there for me, so I had to be there for him. And I think Kerrie, you just run on survival. You go into your fight flight mode, and you just do what you have to do. You run on adrenaline. That's just how we're made up, I think. We also think that maybe at the time Mick didn't really grieve properly from us because he was so worried about me and looking after me. So we sometimes, no one really knows what causes GBS or Guillain-Barré, but we often wonder if maybe that was something because he didn't really look after himself because he was busy focusing on me. But nonetheless, he, incredibly strong emotionally and physically. He with some assistance, but he does most of the farm that he can on his own and walking without aids and things like that. So that was interesting. Kerrie, when he was in hospital, they told me that he would probably was to be in a home or a wheelchair for life. And I actually never told him. And we've actually had conversations about the power of the mind. And so for him, it was never in his psyche that he wasn't going to get better. It was a matter of when. And yeah, we do believe that played a big part in his recovery alongside his own determination and digging deep.
You looked at doing a positive psychology course. You put it off. Did you ever get back to that, or where did you go after all of that?
When he came home from hospital, as I said, the COVID had just hit. So they did they offered the diploma of positive psychology and wellbeing online, which was great. So I could get him settled for the night to watch the news and have tea. And then so once a week, it was sort of like a respite for me, I suppose. And so I had that 2 hours once a week in my office here and online and mixing with other people. And it was really great. And I think for me, when we were just doing some of the intro work to it and learning about the brain basics and what happens when we're stressed. And I was just like, oh my God, how did I get to my late 50s and not know this? My father was an incredible sportsman and my mother, we were a very sporty family. And so we knew the power of the mind and pushing through, but I'd never actually had it explained to me that way. And I was just like, oh my God, Kerrie, it doesn't take your pain away, but it makes you feel that you're not going mad, because when you do go through a traumatic event like this, your brain, Mary Frances O'Connor has written a great book, The Grieving Brain, and in there, and I quote her in my book, that it's, your brain's looking for the same pathway, but it's not there. It's not there. And so you have to retrain and you have to find another pathway to go. So in that meantime, there's a lot of thoughts going everywhere. And I really thought I was going mad. I was losing my mind. And so this just made me went, oh my God, what I'm feeling is normal for what I'm going through. And so that took a huge stress off me. And gave me more self-compassion and understanding. And I was like, why doesn't everyone know this? Why isn't this taught in grade 1? And, a lot of people do know this stuff. And I often think with now in the mental health space, a lot of the politicians and the senior bureaucracy probably do know a lot of this, but so they assume that the general public know it and we don't. And I really feel that's where there's a real resource gap. But so that's I just loved it so much, and putting the things in place, like understanding my triggers and how to manage my behaviour to my emotions more effectively. I think that I just thought, I want to teach this. I want to, do stuff. So I went on and became a certified instructor with the Langley Group, which is where I did my diploma. And people need to also understand that, positive psychology isn't about being positive all the time, because we know that life doesn't work that way. But it is about how we, as I said, I understood my triggers and how we can put things in place to manage that behaviour more effectively when life throws you curveballs. So, I did my emotional intelligence facilitators program with them and their Everyday Heroes program. And then onwards from that, I was introduced to John Mannion through Chris McDermott and Little Heroes Foundation. And Chris was a mental health commissioner at the time. And after I'd done the diploma, he suggested that I do my mental health first aid instructors course. And they were running one, hosting one in Adelaide, and allowed me to join that, which was great. So that is another tool I have. So I actually do adult mental health first aid training, which is the 2-day course. So if people want to be a mental health first aider, the therapy training there for people to learn about in their communities, football clubs, netball clubs, schools, teachers, SSOs. And so I also do teen. So I've been facilitating the teen mental health first aid, which is for students. It's a peer group support training. So I've done that with Loxton High School and also Karoonda area school. And I do like a bit of an introduction to mental health first aid and also conversations around suicide. And then I, at the end of the diploma, because you have to do so many essays and writing and things, and so I actually wrote my own program called Workbench for the Mind, and that was really based on all the things that I learned and the things that I found had helped me through this time. And so Workbench, because Murray, nicknamed Muzz, was a carpenter, so it just sort of made sense, the workbench, and it's about laying it all out on the table. And so if we think of a lady's handbag or, a ute or car glove box, we've got everything we need in there, but we can never find it because we've got too much rolling around. So that's very much, to me, like our minds. We are more powerful than we think, and we have what we need within our minds, but because we have all these other thoughts and things going around, stresses, we can't find them. So it's about laying it out on the table, compartmentalizing everything, and then, putting it so that when life does throw us curveballs, we can easily access those things. And I think I actually used the program myself. It was funny. I found myself over the last year, sort of at times, because I still have incredibly dark days and will forever. And it's like, what's going on? And I go, right, you need to go back to your workbench and go through the steps.
Can you run through those steps?
Yeah. So the workbench stands for well-being, optimism, resilience, kindness, balance, emotional intelligence, neuroscience, care and hope. So they're basically the 10 modules, and then moving forward is the 10th one. And so I think, Kerrie, what I've identified and experienced personally, and what I hear constantly, and in particular in rural areas, is that it's zero to psychologist. There's nothing there in between. So it's waiting till we're so spiraled down that we actually need to go and get a mental health care plan. Whereas I'm certainly not a psychologist, but I'm very lived experience, and I believe that a lot of the time, and I'm certainly not belittling mental illness, it's very serious, but I try and explain to people the difference between mental health and a mental illness. We all actually have mental health, like we all have physical health. And some of us are more mentally fit than others, as some of us are more physically fit than others. And if you're not physically fit, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're disabled. And it's the same. If you're not mentally fit, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're you've got a mental illness. But the same with the analogy, if you roll your ankle or sprain your ankle, and you don't, ice it, rest it, do exercises, look after it, you could end up having a bit of a disability, with your ankle through arthritis or making it worse. So this is the same with mental health from my perspective, that, just because you're having a bad day, a bad week, a bad month, bad couple of months, doesn't necessarily mean that you've got a mental illness. But if we don't understand what's happening and take care of ourselves and put some processes in order, then we can spiral, and then we may end up with a mental illness if we don't take care. So I think, again, for me, that zero to psychologists, there's just nothing. At most workplaces, big workplaces have their EAPs, their employment assistant programs. It's straight to a counsellor or a psychologist. And I'm not belittling, they're very important. I have a psychologist I talk to regularly, but if you've got to wait 6 to 8 weeks up here, which I know you do in certain areas, to get your mental health care plan, and then you have to wait, and that's if you actually need one, and then you have to wait another 6 weeks or so to get access to a professional counsellor or psychologist, that's 16, well, that's over 3 months. And with the access to Google, and, if you're like me, you start Googling, Dr. Google, and you self-diagnose, self-medicate, you think you've got bipolar 1 or whatever, and you spiral yourself out of control. And just because it's on the internet doesn't necessarily mean the information's true. So it's knowing where to get those, that reputable information and guidance. So for me, the Workbench for the Mind is accessible now. It's instant now. If people can access it, and I think the research and the funding that's going into mental health is great, but I think what they're missing is that we need help now today, and it's we need these resources and not zero. So to me, if you had something like Workbench for the Mind that stepped you through your well-being, your optimism, your resilience, kindness, how to manage those things, how to understand your triggers and put some things in place to look after yourself while you're waiting for that appointment with the GP, so that we're not spiraling out of control. And I've also found that some people, participants of Workbench for the Mind, at the end have gone, that's really great. I think I do need to actually reach out to someone. So it actually has that domino effect there, that double edge that can actually lead them, because it's just, as I said before, I don't believe people are broken. I believe they need to learn how to help themselves instead of just always looking for someone to fix us all the time when we're actually not broke.
What are some of those tools, I guess, or those things that you get people to work on first up while they're waiting for help, or to make them more sort of self-aware, or start improving their own mental health?
I mean, the basics are still the same, but for me, I really notice it's being aware. If you're getting really angry or frustrated, it's being aware where it comes out in your body, and you will learn. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. It took me a good year that you start to learn when you're getting stressed. You start to feel it in your body. You'll either get, for me, if I get anxiety really bad, it's like, at first it's like stepping on a pin. You sort of get that hot feeling and that. So for me, understanding my triggers. So my triggers are, I need to do some form of movement each morning, whether it's a walk or a simple exercise. And it's not so much for weight, it's to wake my brain up for the day, to get moving. And, one thing which I think really saved me, that Mick used to get me to do, when Muz passed away, I was quite bedridden for a while. I had to actually get up and face every day. So I had to get up, wash my face, brush my teeth, have something to eat, and then if I wanted to go back to bed for the day, I could. But most of the time I didn't because I'd already got up. So it's like just face the day. Certain foods I eat really trigger me with anxiety. And if not anxiety, it's the sugar. It makes me, like kids have the sugar rush and then the crash. So for me, I've really learned to understand when I'm feeling down or depressed or about what's happened with Muzz, or if it's something else going on. And so if I'm feeling out of whack or feeling wrong, I sort of learn to go, okay, what's going on? What's been going on? And if you look at Easter and Christmas is a perfect time, eating more than you normally would, not finding the time to do the exercise, staying up a bit later, having that extra wine, those sorts of things. And I know for me, when I'm feeling a bit down, I look at what I've done and go, yeah, right, okay. So I put my processes back in place. So that is one. But the best, simplest way I like to think of it is the 1% of your day choose you. I didn't create the 1% of your day theory, but I did adapt it for the 1% of your day choose you theory. And that's that 1% of your day is approximately 14 minutes and 24 seconds, I think. So if we round it down to 14 minutes, so 14 minutes out of 24 hours to choose you. So when people say I don't have time, I haven't got time to go exercise, I haven't got time to do this, I sort of say, bullshit, you do. You can get up 14 minutes earlier. You can stay up 14 minutes later. If you get up 14 minutes earlier, time your clock on your phone. You can walk 7 minutes that way, 7 minutes back. It's just that small increment, which can make long life changes. And so, because I don't believe you can't give what you actually don't have for yourself. So if you've only got 70% self-respect for yourself, then that's the most that you can actually give your partner, your work colleagues, your kids. And if you've only got 50 or 60% self-love, then that's the most that you can give because that's all you've got or you've experienced. So that 1% of your day, the best advice I can give people to look after their own mental health or fitness than those around them as well is to look after your own first, because if you just invest 1% of your day into you increase. No one's ever going to be 100% perfect, but if you just increase those levels, then that's going to have a ripple effect on your relationships around you. And people often say to me, oh, that's rubbish. I love my kids. I love my partner more than I love life itself. And again, bullshit. How can you? It's nearly like an escapism. It's sort of like if I do all this for them, then that's showing how much love. But it's not, because we need to learn to slow it down. Again, if you haven't got 1% of your day, 14 minutes out of 24 hours to spend with your partner, or to give yourself a quick meditation or listen to a book or something, then something is very out of alignment with your values in your life.
And priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Kerrie, too, on that, what people tend to do is they tend to live their life to other people's values. So values aren't your morals necessarily. Values are what your priorities, as you just said, your priorities. And sometimes if you break them down into your top 5, you'll have lots of other values, but if you put your top 5 and if you see something's out of alignment, you'll notice it in how you've got them listed. And it's a good way, if we go back to that glove box, just because you tidy it up once doesn't mean that's it forever. You have to keep going back and making sure it's not full of clutter again. It's the same with our minds. And I think we're in a different era now, a different age, and I think it's, putting yourself first or being kind to yourself is not being selfish. It's actually being self-caring, and by looking after yourself first, then like that, 1% of your day, then your partner, husband, wife, work, your children are going to be getting a better version of you. So that is going to be better for them, which is going to in turn increase their self-esteem, confidence, or how they feel about themselves.
just looking at some of the work that you do, and tell us a bit more about NLP.
It's not about taking your memories away or anything, but the timeline therapy is about going back through it without having to relive it and letting go of the emotion attached to the memory. And so those combination of things have just really helped me with my own mental fitness. And as a bit of a mental fitness coach as well, it helps me communicate more effectively with my clients as well.
You mentioned in there that you've written a book called Grief, obviously following the passing of your son Muzz. How did that all come about, and how did it all come together, I guess?
It was quite interesting because through the diploma, having to do essays and assignments, a lot of them writing and self-reflection, I probably had most of the book written already. It was about just bringing it into practice. And for me, when Muzz passed away, I really struggled to find a book that either wasn't really in depth and too complex to because your brain, as I said earlier, is looking for that new pathway. So I just, would get, it was just too hard or too in depth to read. And then a lot of others were on death of husbands, partners, and death of through drugs. And whilst Muzz had those, traumas earlier on, he didn't die of any of that. So I just really struggled to find something that I resonated with. And so I thought, I'll write the book that I wish I could have found.
Did that then lead to perhaps one of your latest ventures in podcasting as well?
Yeah, podcasting was quite funny. It was actually before Christmas, and finished all my NLP work and stuff, and I just had this vision of, so my Workbench for the mind, I have delivered face-to-face, but I made it a online learning tool last year. And so I just thought, so many people say to me, give me a little tip or, what's something we can do. And I thought, well, I'd love to do a podcast one day. And then I just thought, well, why wait? Just do it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's sort of taken off too. It's not necessarily all about mental health, but it's more about how mental fitness, I suppose, affects different areas of our life. So I've had a personal trainer on there. I've had someone talking about menopause. I've had a guy do breath work, how to, de-stress ourselves or actions we can do. I've had, all different women from not necessarily the rural areas, but, just everywhere, just telling their story. And I think people just, like what you do, Kerrie, I think there's a lot, and in particular rural, but there's a lot of women that go under the radar. And I think it's really important that we share as many stories as we can instead of just being, what we get fed on mainstream media.
What is it that drives you and keeps you going and looking for these new avenues to help people?
I think it's part of my therapy. To me, there just has to be a purpose to the tragedy. Because there just has to be. That's the only way my brain can actually comprehend what's happened. And for me, it's important to help others as well as myself. So I just think if you're any aspect of your life, if you've found something that helps you cope or get through, then why not share it? And I love to talk. And so it gives me purpose. And it helps heal me on a daily basis by helping others. It actually in turn helps myself. So for me, that's, I couldn't sit and do nothing. I would probably spiral myself down a hole that I'd never get out of. So there just has to be purpose to the tragedy.
That was Suzi Evans from Mantung. To learn more about her mental fitness workshops, her book, or her podcast, visit her website, or you can follow her on Instagram under Suzi Evans. And if you enjoyed this episode of Riverland Women, don't forget to follow and subscribe because it really helps others discover the stories we share. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Riverland Women, or have a look at my website at thepodcaststation.com.au to learn more about what I do and some of the services I have on offer. Thank you for listening.